Every writer knows that the best conversations about writing don't happen in classrooms or symposia or any fancy artisanal setting. They happen at the bar, usually after deadline. That's the vibe we're going for here. This is The Other 51, a podcast about writing with me, Brian Moritz. This week, I'm joined by author Rion Amilcar Scott. Rion, before we get to any of the writing stuff, we have important SpiderMan business to talk about. I think. I think I saw on Instagram you saw Far From Home, right?
I did.
All right. All right, me too. So, spoiler alert for the next few minutes while we geek out about Spider-Man. If you haven't seen it, skip ahead. First of all, because kind of like, what'd you think of the movies? I have opinions on it. I liked it, but didn't love it. So, I'm wondering what you thought of it.
I love the whole MCU. I love everything MCU. I think I like the first one better. I think because it was more surprising. It was a better. It was the first time we saw MCU Spider-Man. It's not the first time, but the first time we saw him in his own adventure. They decided to skip the radioactive spider, the origin story. So it was more surprising. This one was cool. I love superhero anything. So I mean, the character's really endearing. The character is really endearing. This kid.
I feel like of all the Spider-Man movies, they finally got him right with the Tom Holland one, because they got kind of like the nerdy Peter Parker side, but they also got that he's super funny when he's Spider-Man. Like, that's what I never liked about the Tobey Maguire ones. He didn't have that like kind of quick wit about him. And in the Andrew Garfield, they kind of had that, but it wasn't very good otherwise. So
that's the essence of the character, that he can't defeat some of these people, so he'll defeat them with his wit.
So do you have a favorite? Is Spider-Man your favorite superhero or MCU character?
Growing up, Spider-Man was my favorite. I spent a lot of time reading Spider-Man comics, more than anything else. I don't know, MCU, I think, I don't know who my favorite MCU character is. I just love the MCU altogether. I think Black Panther is my favorite movie, but Black Panther is definitely not my favorite character. So I don't know. I don't know who my favorite character is. Think about that.
And there's so many different versions of it. Like, my favorite comic is Hawkeye, and the Hawkeye run from Matt Fraction and David Aja a couple years ago. I love that Hawkeye, but the Hawkeye in the MCU is very, very different. And I don't know. It is hard to pick one. And so, as someone who writes for a living and creates a fictional world, I mean, looking at the MCU and up until, let's say, Spider-Man Far From Home, because that kind of, I think, wraps up Phase 3. Mm-hmm. What impresses you, or kind of what are your impressions of the world they build and the storytelling and all the character building and all that goes into making this series of movies work so well?
You know what I really like about it? It's really impressive, and completely unprecedented that they're able to build this world across movies. What I like about them is they learn from their mistakes. Like, the first two Thor movies weren't very good, and then they went back and they completely revamped the character of Thor. They turned him into this lovable goofball, but he's still, it was almost like a parody of the first two Thor movies. It's almost a parody of the character, but it's not a parody. It's just a different version of it. So it sort of like argues with itself, and I like that they, and I like that they don't, they deal with some heavy themes, but they don't take it too seriously, It's hard, you compare that with the DC universes. They deal with heavy themes, but it's so ponderous,
right?
And it's just not fun, And this is what I dreamt about from my childhood. My entire childhood, I dreamt about good Marvel movies, about seeing these characters on the screen. Captain America is so much better a character than I thought he could ever be.
I agree. I agree with Cap, by the way. Like he's a character that kind of shouldn't work. He's kind of like Superman in that he's so good, he's not super interesting as a character. But the way they do it, the way they wrote him in the movies, and obviously the way that Chris Evans plays him is just so great that he becomes super interesting and super likable.
Right. Yeah, so I really think that it's the fact that it's so much fun, and I spent all my life dreaming about this moment. When I was a kid, there was the Punisher, and there was a Captain America movie, and they were terrible. But this is just so true to the characters.
Yeah. So, what was it about SpiderMan that you loved growing up and coming up reading comics?
I started because my brother was reading them. And so it was kind of forbidden because he wouldn't let me touch his toys or read his comic books or anything. So it was this forbidden thing. But I think as I got older, I think Spider-Man, he was his character that was just so vulnerable. He had these powers, but his main villains, his powers are kind of useless against. You can't really, like Sandman or Hydro. Web shooters don't really do anything to them.
Right.
Super strength is not helpful in fighting those villains. So I think the way Stan Lee and Steve Ditko sort of created that character, they built in all these vulnerabilities. And his biggest vulnerability is his insecurity, and I guess his poverty too. And I really like that.
Speaking of Stan Lee, I do want to mention one of my favorite things I've seen on the internet in the past year was the letter that air quote Stan Lee wrote to your boy just before he passed away. That was amazing. That was so good.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, how did that all come about?
It was right after Trump was elected. I did a reading at a bookstore in Baltimore, and no one showed up. I didn't want to be there myself. No one showed up. They were all at the protest. Yeah, they were all at the protest, and it was really sad. Then I went to the bookshelf after the reading, and I think I had a discount that night because I was the featured reader. I saw this book that Devil Girl, not Devil Girl, Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and I meant to get that for my son, and I picked it up, and I was like, it would be fun if Stan Lee actually sent it to him. And you know what? Let me rewind back a little bit. He maybe the weekend before that, Stan Lee was in Parade magazine, and my son had been reading the article, and I saw him marking it up, and I was like, "What are you doing?" And I was teaching college at the time, and he was like, "I'm grading." I was like, "Okay." And then he comes with this envelope that says to Marvel Comics, and he's like, "Can you send this to Stan Lee?" So I thought it's an opportunity for him to actually respond, to that letter.
And it was great because it came out as and you published this little essay. You gave that letter to him, and then you put it out online, right? Your boy, Stan Lee's last letter.
Uh-huh.
That was fantastic.
Because my wife was sort of like, the whole time she was like, he's old. Stan Lee's old. You're gonna eventually have to explain death to our kid. And the day came, so I figured, it was time.
So, this is great. This is great having a local author for me on the podcast this week. So the joke there is, we go to our Barnes and Noble a lot. Like a lot of times on Friday night, we have nothing to do. We'll go to the Barnes and Noble. It's one of those double deckers, and we'll just walk around, maybe get a book for my kid. And I walk past the local author section, and your first book is sitting there. And it's funny because you don't live in Rochester, and I've never lived in Rochester.
My dad did at a certain point.
Oh, he did. Okay. Maybe they're either maybe they know a lot, or I don't know how it wound up there, because we worked together in Binghamton, but if you don't know upstate New York, Binghamton and Rochester, they're not far, but they're not close.
They're not close, right?
No.
They're completely different towns. Yeah, I think I had I was at a conference, a writing conference, the Ladder Lit conference. I think it was that same weekend. or it was around the same time you had sent me that tweet. So maybe they had gotten that confused. They thought I was a local author because I was at this conference.
Oh, okay. That at least makes some sense. But anyway, we want to talk a lot about your new book that's coming out in 6 weeks. Is it?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's right upon me. Yeah, I've lived with some of these stories for a very long time, more than 10 years, some of them.
Really?
So I'm glad that they're going out into the world.
Oh, that's excellent. The book is The World Doesn't Require You.
Yep.
First of all, the congratulations on getting this book out there and getting the second book out there and kind of the attention it's getting. It's really, really well deserved. I'm looking forward to reading it.
Thank you.
So for people who aren't familiar with it or with the world that it's in, can you just kind of set up the world of these stories?
So it takes place in Cross River, Maryland, which is a fictional town that was founded in 1807 after the only successful slave revolt. So there were no successful slave revolts in this country. Depending on so in my world there was a single one, and the descent and they revolted in this town called Port Hugo, Virginia, and then they moved over to Maryland where they established a town which stands to this day. So most of the stories take place in the present day. Some of them are they go back a little bit. But most of the stories are sort of about the descendants of this insurrection.
Okay, and this is similar to Insurrections, your first collection, right? Same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it takes place in the same town. A few locations and even a few characters overlap.
Okay. So you mentioned kind of that you've been living with these stories for a long time. So kind of talk about the process of writing this as a collection of short stories, because it's different than a novel, obviously, which is one piece kind of front to back, but this is a collected work. So how did this come out of your previous writings and the previous book and some of that other stuff?
Well, some of the stories I wrote at the same time as the stories in Insurrections, but I just couldn't get them to work. They were just beyond my ability. They just needed more time in order to sit and so these stories are they're a bit more. There's a lot of magical realism. There's some science fiction. They're a bit weirder than the stories in the first collection. And I think that may be why it was just sort of outside of my abilities at the time. My abilities had to grow in order to get some of these stories to work. So a few of them are newer, but most of them, actually, a lot of them go back. Sometimes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you that's really interesting. Did you kind of, with the science fiction and the growing and magical realism and all that stuff, did you have a moment where you kind of realized that that's what you were trying to do? Was it organic, or did you kind of set out to grow the world that way? I don't know if I'm making sense here, but
that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always embedded in there. I think the idea of this alternative history is there, I could play it straight, but that's not always that much fun. When you have this idea which can go in so many different directions, I just want to see how far it can go. So I have a story with some robots in there, 2 stories with robots, just to see if I could make that work and see if they fit into the themes. Sometimes I get these ideas, and I'm kind of like, well, that's not going to work because it's not going to fit into the Cross River Saga. Then I'm like, why not? Why can't it fit in? So it's like, I want to, it's good to stretch it out.
There's got to be some freeing thing when you realize, wait, this can fit in. I made this world.
Right, exactly. Right. It's really freeing, and it's constantly happening. I'm constantly getting ideas, and it's like I can figure out a way to make that work, and it becomes this challenge.
So how do you kind of? I'm curious from a writer standpoint. How do you write through those challenges? I mean, do you sit with a piece and do you add to it? Do you start it anew? What's your if you can think of an example of a piece that kind of you built on and wasn't quite ready for the first book, but is ready now?
Yeah. Let's see. So there's a story called Numbers, which I wrote initially for an anthology called Long Hidden. I had this idea of these, water nymphs, sirens, for a long time, and I saw this call for submissions, and I what I do is I think about these ideas for a very long time. They sit with me. I don't know how long I had that waters nymph idea, and it wasn't ready. I knew it wasn't ready when I saw the call for submission, but I didn't have any other idea that would fit, and I thought it would. So I sort of sat with it, it was a very hard story to write because I had a deadline that I needed to make, and I knew the idea. I hadn't let it sit for long enough, so I knew I was taking it out of the oven a little earlier. I played with it for a very long time, and it's sort of about sitting with it, taking that idea, and a lot of times my stories don't really come to life until I combine two ideas that I have, that seem disparate, So there's water nymphs and an idea about these gangsters. The town has these three crime families. So I wanted to explore that. So it was, mixing the idea of the crime families with the sirens, and Numbers came out of that.
And so when you're sitting with an idea, are you doing any kind of writing or note taking on it, or are you literally just kind of letting it like kind of sit in your head until you're ready to?
Just letting it sit in my head for a while.
Okay.
It's usually just sitting there.
Okay. And how do you know when you're ready?
That's a good question. A lot of times I don't. I might sit down and write it, and it's not ready, and it just, and it just sort of dies on the vine. And that's useful too, because it might die for a little while, and when I come back and I look at it, and then it's like, okay, my mind is ready. So it's just about taking it out and playing with it and seeing if it will actually have legs and stand up.
Okay, yeah, that can be so useful in all writing, like kind of like you try it out and then you come back to it and you see, no matter the format, fiction, academic writing, newspaper, whatever, you can kind of see like, oh, you see the hole in the story, or you figure out somewhere new to take it, and that time is useful, and it's really helpful to be able to kind of to break that story in the way that it needs to go.
Yeah, I definitely advocate that. It's like you don't always have to act on the idea 10 minutes after you get it. You might sit with it for 10 years, and then your mind, because your subconscious will work on it. Your subconscious is constantly working on stuff.
Yeah. So one story, I was rereading some of your stories the other day to get ready for this, and one of my favorites is 202 Checkmates. Such a good piece.
Thank you.
And I was just struck by that story, and by kind of the way you build that world, and you're kind of in it right away. Do you remember that story and kind of how it came together?
Yeah, I remember exactly how it came together. My girlfriend, my wife now, challenged me to write from perspective of a girl. For some reason, I remember her saying teenage girl, but she said girl. So I was a lot at the time. I played. I always wanted to be good at chess, but I realized I was never ever in my life going to be good at chess.
Same. I want to be good so bad, but it's just I can't. Nope.
Yeah, I remember I was teaching in an after school program, and these kids were just whipping me. These junior high kids taking me apart. I love chess. So it was something that I could do something with, and I thought of the idea of defeat. So I came up with that first sentence. In my 11th year, my father taught me defeat. That presents a question. How does the father teach defeat? And so it's the story. I just went about exploring that throughout the story. Yeah, no, and it was a very useful story to write. I had such problems writing female characters up until that point, but I realized that you really have to start with similarity. So I started with the character. I started, what would be similar, what was similar as an 11-year, as an 11-year-old, what was I interested in? What mattered to me, my relationships, and then sort of expanded out by then, through yeah.
So, kind of getting back to the new book, did you? Because it's a collection of short stories, and it's maybe a stupid question, but did you kind of set out saying I'm going to have a collection of short stories and write to fill that, or were there just or were you writing stuff and then like how did the short stories come into an anthology like this?
Yeah, I mean, I like writing stories. I like I like the being able to get in and out of stories. And so some of these had been had been sitting around, and I guess at first I was writing stories to get used to get to know Cross River a little bit, to get it to know a little, know the town a little better. But then I started started really loving the mechanics of stories. And so with the first collection, it had a certain tone. And some of the stories, like I said, there were a few that were finished. But they didn't match the tone. Like the first story in my book is a story called David Sherman, the Last Son of God. Which I'm not sure if it was completely finished at the time, but it was near enough finished. But I didn't think it would fit into Insurrections. And I knew that with some of the stories that I had sitting around, that weren't ready yet, I knew that they had a certain tone of weirdness or wildness. And I figured that it would be they would work well together.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious too, because this book came out in 2016, just before the election. I'm curious, how has both your writing and how has Cross River changed since the election, since Trump?
That's a good question. I mean, I think there are definitely things that I'm concerned about that are in the book. There's a novella in there, and I don't know if I consciously set out to say, hey, I'm going to make a comment, but it comes out definitely. I'm looking back at it, and there's this part where they're talking about some of the town's tyrannical past, which I'm concerned about our country, possibly having a tyrannical future, and there's a tyrannical present. President and president, but a president with they're actually children in cages, which is very, very, very concerning. So some of that did seep into the book.
Okay.
But I always feel like that whatever's going on in the world, that's gonna fit in. You have to really write through that. It's easy to feel like, fiction is such an indulgent thing, but it's really not. It's really sort of how it's how I see the world, and you're sort of helping other people define how they see the world. So it's it's always I always have to tell myself what I'm doing is not indulgent. It's actually important.
Right. So how do you want people to, how do you want to kind of influence, maybe I don't know if that's the right word, but how people see the world through this collection?
Well, I think, and that's a big question. It's a big question. The whole idea to me is that people take it in and they're able to it helps them define their own thinking, but arguing with the stories, seeing the characters, writing about things that are I mean, it's good to be able to see certain things in fiction and that are in real life. You know, like I just read this story, the story collection, A Lucky Man by Jamel Brinkley. Beautifully written. But the one thing that's cool is like I was like I've never seen these people, these black men, you know, in fiction, right? I've seen black men in fiction, but these particular black men, you know, I'd never seen, you know, these individuals in fiction. And that was a really cool thing to see, you know. Various subcultures that you know, that you know, that you have a familiarity with, and actually seeing them.
Right.
So I kind of want that to happen, but I think most of all I want people to sit down and have a good time with the book, you know. That has value too.
Yeah. So what's this time like for you as an author? Like you've gotten some, you know, Esquire named it one of the books to look out for in 2019 in the summer, and you know, I know you got the galley copies, but what's this like 6-week, month out time like for you when the book's done, but it's not like it's starting to get read, but it's not out yet? So what's this like for you this time of being an author?
So, you know, it's anxiety. That's what it is. It's anxiety. You know, with the first book, I didn't think anyone was gonna read it at all. You know, so you know, this time was kind of like in almost any other time. You know, it was excitement. You know, it's like, okay, there's a book coming out, but you know, I thought you know, book was gonna come out. You know, a few people were gonna read it, and that would be it. But more people read it than I expected. You know, not a whole lot, but you know, it exceeded my expectations. Now with this, I don't know I'm just like, you know, the people are gonna read it. You know, there are people that are gonna read it. You know, I can't pretend like it's like, you know, I mean, I don't know how many people are gonna read it, but it's and that brings the anxiety, you know.
Right. And I was wondering, coming off of the success you had with Insurrections, I mean, was there ever any kind of feeling of follow-up pressure of like in writing these other stories, like kind of either living up to it or, man, like a lot of people read this and I won awards and now I got to come up with take 2 on this? Was there ever any kind of like extra anxiety about that or extra pressure on that?
No, because I had this book almost, you know, it wasn't ready to go, but I knew I had this other book planned out.
Okay.
And I knew it was better. I knew that this book was better than the last one, you know. So I was excited, and you know, I was like, let me just finish this other book, and you know, thankfully I was able to have the time to finish it up. So, you know, I didn't really have that pressure, and especially because, you know, this book is completely totally different than Insurrections. And it takes place in the same town, but it's different. So I wasn't, yeah.
So how is this book better, and maybe kind of more specifically, how do you think you're a better writer in this book than you were on the first one?
You know, the first one I had no idea what I was doing. You know, I wouldn't say I had no idea what I was doing, because I've been writing for a while. But you know, a lot of those stories are stories that I wrote to get the mechanics of writing down, like 202 Checkmates. So I was trying to figure his stuff out, and it wasn't necessarily like, you know, it was written with the intention of one day it would be published, but it was the immediate reason for writing it was to sort of get the mechanics down. And there's stories like that like I wrote this story, Rolling in My Six-Fold, which is the wildest story I've ever written. I wrote it at the same time I wrote 202 Checkmates, and so I guess it was written for that same reason. But over the years, I was able to refine it. And make it a lot stronger. And I knew a whole lot more what I was doing. With a lot of these stories, I knew what I was doing. Even if they were older stories, you know, I went back at them with a more mature eye. So you know, I would say it's better because, you know, a lot of stories are more intentional.
Okay. So I asked you this when I had you on a couple years ago, so I'll ask you again. What's the best thing you've read lately?
The best thing I've read lately is Heavy by Kiese Layman, which is it's just this incredible memoir. I've never seen such honesty on the page.
Really?
It's almost uncomfortable honesty, but you know the comfort in it is that it's so well written. What I said last time?
I have to look it up. I have no idea. It wasn't that, I know. But all right. So when is the book out? When can people buy it? I know they can pre-order it now. August 20th.
August 20th. Yeah, or they can pre-order right now and it'll show up like magic.
Awesome, Rion. This has been great. Appreciate your time and great catching up with you again.
Yeah, great talking to you.
As always, thanks for listening to The Other 51. You can find show notes for this episode and all our episodes at sportsmediaguy.com on the Other 51 tab. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. I can highly recommend Overcast for this. Our theme music is by Ellie Moritz.